August 1936. The Olympic Games in Berlin were a great success for Hitler and his people. Yet the Nazis were far too mediocre, except when it came to crime, to invent anything new, including in the realm of great performances and sport. Even before the Nazis rose to power, the Weimar Republic had already grasped the interest of using great physical, athletic and mechanical feats to help get Germany back on its feet. Of the Third Reich were entirely focused on orchestrating and pushing one-upmanship to the limit, on land or in the air. But in so doing, they steered all their models straight into disaster. The impressive boxer, Max Schmeling, solid as a rock, indefatigable worker and budding world champion. Archangel Bernd Rosemeyer, brave and daring, able to master the wildest racing cars of the day. Intrepid aviator Ernst Udet, brilliant inventor, author of countless aeronautic exploits. The gigantic Hindenburg, swollen with hydrogen and pride, holder of 1,000 records for speed and distance. The most hardened and well-equipped mountain climbers, off in the Himalayas to conquer the world's highest peaks. Not to mention Olympic athletes such as Lutz Long, the elegant young long jumper who simply wasn't permitted to fall short. Even the alluring Leni Riefenstahl, zealous and determined champion of athletic expression. Hitler's ambassadors were meant to be infallible heroes, while in fact, they were simply the signs of looming failure. In the aftermath of World War I, defeated Germany suffered a historical economic crisis. Ruined by war and the economic sanctions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, the Weimar Republic experienced hyperinflation and unprecedented unemployment. Many industrial sectors liable to help remilitarize the country were outlawed. Only the automotive field, less a threat, was retained. In the 20s, Fritz von Opel, grandson of the founder of the country's first automobile manufacturer, already illustrated Germany's openness to modernity. With his knowledge of pyrotechnics, he perfected a thoroughly aerodynamic vehicle with rocket propulsion and stabilizers that looked like airplane wings. A rather intoxicating experience for Rocket Fritz, but one that was telling of German industrials' irrepressible determination to achieve. To turn a new page, such was the hope of a certain Ernst Udet, World War I flying ace with 62 confirmed victories. Under the drastic Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forbidden to develop military equipment or aircraft. Udet had to dream up new planes, lighter, better aircraft, even if they were only made of paper. while hoping to see them one day soon fill the abandoned airfields. In 1927, Udet ascended Zugspitze, Germany's highest peak. On a whim, he decided to nosedive 9,800 feet down to the valley in a glider, as vulnerable as a baby bird flung from its nest. He leapt into thin air for the sheer beauty of it, and to show how Germany once more had the wind in its sails. Other evocative sights seemed vital as well, like the legendary Matterhorn, with its terrible north face that had never been climbed. In August 1931, brothers Tony and Franz Schmidt tackled it with their old puttees and oversized ice axes. But they also sported newfangled steel cleats, the latest craze amongst German mountaineers. Higher, ever higher to vanquish the monster on the slopes that led to glory, as well as redemption, especially when the setting is dear to Germany's eternal romanticism. When documentary cameras couldn't capture faces, fiction took over. The films of Arnold Fonck, adept of the mountain film genre. His muse, a plucky 25-year-old actress named Leni Riefenstahl, captured by her mentor's loving camera. The filmmaker fell under the spell of this intrepid actress, game for any risk. In each of his films, Fonck blended romance with reality. He expected all his actors to succumb to his wishes, starting with Leni Riefenstahl. Another fearless figure, Ernst Udet, who would rescue the beautiful heroine in almost every one of Fonck's films. Like Riefenstahl, he attained star status and started an affair with her, forming a mismatched couple besotted with adventure. With his goatee, Hugo Echner also dreamed of progress and achievement, especially since his grandiose and peaceful Zeppelins respected the constraints of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was already puffed up over its L-127, christened in 1928. Never mind that the Krupp steelworks down below was still operating in slow motion. 776 feet long, capable of reaching 80 miles per hour, such a Leviathan had never been seen in the sky. 3 months later, under Echner's watchful eye, the Mastodon set off to conquer America and flew over the Azores. A storm soon threatened. But in spite of inclement weather and inky skies, the trip was smooth sailing. Upon completing its journey, the L-127 turned out to be 5 times faster than the best ships of the day. But what the people of the Weimar really wanted was a flesh and blood champion, a real athlete. In 1930, German boxer Max Schmeling headed to the US to vie for the heavyweight world championship. At his side, his Jewish manager, Joe Jacobs, who'd been with him from the start.
Hello, everybody. Here was a good trip. Little bit storm, but now we're back. And the States.
Glad to be here again, Max.
All right, Paul. I'm very glad to be in the States again. That's Nico, you see. He's a
Nixie?
5 months old dachshund, you see.
Yeah.
A little dagger. A German dagger.
Lady or
Like him? There's a lady.
Oh, Max! Oh, Max!
The likable German would be up against the defending world champion Jack Sharkey, an American of Lithuanian origin who liked to train to the folk music of his adoptive country. Germany was counting on Schmeling to bring it closer to America, even if the messenger was more in it for himself and the world title. In New York on the day of the match before 80,000 spectators, Schmeling struggled to get a punch at Sharkey, who held him at bay with his left hook. Whenever the German did get close, he was immediately countered. In the fourth round, Sharkey countered Schmeling once more, but with a blow below the belt, which was against regulations. With Schmeling woozy, the referee overwhelmed and the public in an uproar, the German, against all expectations, was declared the winner on a foul. So what if the victory was dubious? It was the euphoria of the win that counted in Weimar's Berlin, where people like to make merry and forget about their woes. Now, it fell upon the new world champ to lead the dance, in a sentimental film allowing all of Germany, like his fiancée, to make eyes at its decidedly well-built Apollo. Not everyone is so well sculpted, but everyone should make an effort to get a nation racked by defeat back on its feet. Germany had some good old recipes when it came to this. The famous Turnverein, gymnastic festivals open to everyone, from the most unathletic to actual experts in parallel bars or the vaulting horse, two German inventions. The idea was to redevelop order, discipline and obedience, and breathe new life into a humiliated population. Even the gals were called to arms in innocent-looking romper suits. Yet all these efforts couldn't prevent the country from sinking further into its slump, with the Great Depression of '29 thrusting nearly 4 million unemployed workers out into the streets. It was one strike and demonstration after another. They provided fuel for a certain Adolf Hitler. Boosted by his brown shirts and public opinion that sought an authority figure, he lusted after power more and more. In light of the country's difficulties, these elegant gentlemen of the International Olympic Committee, led by its Belgian president, Count de Baillet-Latour, were the first to want to help Germany out of its funk. In 1931, they selected the Weimar Republic to host the future Summer and Winter Olympics in 1936. Marshal Hindenburg, Germany's old glory and President of the Republic, was pleased to salute an Olympic banner that would crown Germany's return amongst democratic nations. But it was Adolf Hitler who would reap the benefits. Hitler who understood the importance of taking the legal road to power. In January 1933, he did so. The ex-agitator won the elections and became Germany's new chancellor. He first needed to form his new government, striking a balance with the leading classes and industrials who brought him to power. Sport was the last thing on the new chancellor's mind. This decidedly ungainly Aryan supporter couldn't swim, drive, or barely even ride a horse. His only record, the number of pills he ingested each day. For Marshal Goering, it was more his weight. Yet what could be better than sport to beef up these new conquerors he counted on, to change the face of Germany and the world, and to ensure their compliance with the realm he dreamed of? Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Education and Propaganda, was the first to grasp the importance of sport. A short stature and club foot didn't prevent Goebbels from realizing how sport could help shape youth and how his champions would serve his propaganda. To do so, Goebbels needed a devoted underling. Hans von Trammer und Osten wasn't much of a crackerjack himself. He had a stiff, handicapped arm he often hid. But he presented well and worshipped discipline. In July 1933, Goebbels appointed him Reichssportführer. The task of radicalizing and purifying sports clubs fell to him. Within 2 years, every politically affiliated or denominational sports association was banned, leaving only those operating under the swastika. All Jews were excluded from sports venues, where the only players allowed to show their tricks were young, purebred Aryans. And if they were blonde, better yet. The taste for competition needed to be instilled in Germans at an early age, and already Hitler youth camps were ruled with an iron hand. German sport has only one task, claimed Goebbels, to strengthen the character. Aryan or bust, that was the slogan. Behind all the play fighting and joyful fisticuffs, the message was always the same. The notion of battles led by little blonde angels with already terrifying grins. And then the exercise would turn into a gladiator race and end in purifying waters. Young Aryans perhaps, but already in chains. Renowned champions weren't yet fully concerned. Boxer Max Schmeling and his fiancée, film star Annie Ondra, displayed more independence, especially on their wedding day. Indeed, there's nothing very National Socialistic about that collapsible top hat, the bride's Slavic origins, and this all-too-Christian ceremony. But there needs to be some signs of allegiance. Hence the presence of this young guard of honor, more reflective of Germany at the time. Another figure also displayed independence. Ace Ernst Udet was welcomed with pomp in the US, even if it was hoped he'd serve the German cause in a country the Nazis were handling with kid gloves.
Major Udet, on behalf of the National Air Race Committee, I want to welcome you. You thrilled all of us 2 years ago when you flew at the National Air Races in Cleveland. That's why we brought you to the National Air Races this year, July 1st to 4th. Thank you, fellow.
Udet had not yet clearly chosen his path. He was mainly there to promote his aerobatic skills and his Flamingo, a small craft he invented with a 100-horsepower engine, the limit allowed by the Treaty of Versailles. In July 1933, spectators in Los Angeles got their money's worth with his loops that made it seem like each time he'd crash into the ground. Then, the daredevil actually did scrape the lawn. The audience in Chicago also delighted in one of his favorite tricks, gliding through the air, then brushing the ground with his wing to pick up a handkerchief supposedly left by one of his admirers. The show was breathtaking, especially when he would cut his engine and plummet like a dead leaf. Then right his aircraft just in the nick of time. Even Hollywood offered to open its doors to him. But it was in Germany that the eternal charmer chose to keep reboosting the enthusiasm of his spectators. Already under the Weimar Republic, female aviators embodied women's liberation. Elli Beinhorn emerged as a pioneer of German aviation after several long trans-African flights that made her the most famous woman in the country. The regime immediately exploited her image, sending her, camera in hand, to Namibia, a colony Germany lost after World War I, but where many Germans still lived.
Diese Aufnahmen werden Ihnen zum Bewusstsein bringen, dass deutscher Geist dort unten in Afrika weiterlebt. Aber jetzt kommen wir zu der Jugend. Und da werden Sie sehen, dass gerade die Jugend aber 100%ig in unserem neuen Geist in Deutschland drinnen ist und mitgegangen ist.
Goes to show, for the Nazis, nothing was left to chance, including a summer solstice celebration 20,000 leagues from Berlin.
Wir versprechen Treue zum Deutschtum in Südwest. Wir versprechen Gehorsam gegen alle Führer und Vorgesetzten. Wir versprechen Pflichterfüllung und Pünktlichkeit im Dienst.
Hitler had to be everywhere, and on everyone's lips and in their minds, in Africa as well as on the highest alpine peaks. But what von Chammer, the Reichssportführer, really wanted was to see a swastika flying over the Himalayas, the roof of the world.
Der Kampf den Himalaya ist die Krönung der alpinen Idee. Die deutsche Himalaya-Expedition 1934 zum Nanga Parbat ist eine Herzenssache des deutschen Volkes geworden. So kommen im Kampf die Hochgipfel die vornehmsten Mannestugenden zum Einsatz. Einordnung in den militärischen Geist der Gemeinschaftsleistung, Kameradschaft, Kampfesmut und lose Hingabe an das Ziel.
In 1934, not one of the highest Himalayan peaks had ever been conquered. With Everest, the tallest, located on British-controlled territory, the Germans set their sights on Nanga Parbat, without failing to engage the help of two more experienced British officers. By March, the Reich's envoys were ready to tackle the job, led by Willy Merkel, mountain climber and obedient soldier. The Nazis had always viewed the Himalayas as the cradle of the Aryan race and lost excellence. Their cameras were always more interested in the anthropometry of faces than capturing memories. Over 600 porters in all were recruited. They were poorly equipped and had no cleats, that valuable German invention. These oversights didn't stop them from getting good shots. The watchword stayed the same: look good and downplay hardships. Early on at base camp, one of the most brilliant climbers on the team, Alfred Drexel, died of pulmonary edema. A wooden cross for lack of an iron one to mark the grave of a man who died for his fatherland. That day, the full challenge still lay ahead, despite the avalanches constantly roaring down Nanga Parbat, king of mountains. But Merkel, studying his maps, didn't want to throw in the towel. On July the 5th, the lead party attacked the summit, which Merkel deemed was within reach. The climb was slowed by lack of oxygen and a thick blanket of snow. Soon the lead climbers reached 25,900 feet, only 750 feet from the top, when suddenly an enormous avalanche sealed the fate of the mountaineers. More still perished during the descent. 4 German mountaineers, including Merkel, and 10 porters lost their lives. A stinging defeat for a symbolic victory. Nanga Parbat henceforth became known as the German mountain, everywhere in the Reich. The same month, July 34, in a different base camp, right in Germany, other conquerors were keeping busy. Like here in Saxony, where a certain Ferdinand Porsche, in a floppy cap and always on the cutting edge, was developing new prototypes. At Auto Union, the 4-ring brand sprung from a shower of subsidies. Ferdinand Porsche had perfected new racing cars with rear-wheel drive. On July 15th, these races were out in force in the Nürburgring arena. The Ring, reputed to be the most demanding and dangerous track in the world. From the start, the duel between Mercedes and Auto Union lived up to its promise, leaving the foreign competition in the dust. Soon, ace driver Caracciola and his Mercedes were in the lead, with Auto Union close behind. But on the 14th lap, the Mercedes conked out. Which sealed the win for Auto Union, the new apple of the Reich's eye. Their leader, Hans Stuck, triumphed across the finish line, before duly thanking the right person.
Na also, was lange währt, wird endlich gut. Einen deutschen Sieg auf deutschem Fahrzeug mit deutschem Fahrer ringen konnten. Das Werk und die Unterstützung unseres Führers, das ich hiermit bedanke. Heil unserem Führer! Heil! Heil Hitler, unserem Führer!
A compliment that went straight to the heart of the man it was aimed at. Hitler never missed a chance to inaugurate the Berlin Auto Show to better drive the point home.
Unsere Bahn- und Motorräder sind nicht nur die schnellsten, sondern wir können mit Stolz sagen, auch mit die besten der Welt. Der deutsche Arbeiter wird gerade in seinem Qualitätswert von keinem anderen Arbeiter übertroffen.
Ah, how beautiful the Führer's cars were. The cars that made you number one and therefore superior. At the Mercedes stand, the brand he'd been loyal to since the beginning of his career, Hitler was all a-swoon. Sure, Auto Union was no joke. But for Marshal Göring as well, nothing compared to a car with a star, especially when it could help drive the Reich's ambitious highway program, token of its modernity. Like here, where Göring mixed work with pleasure between two hunting excursions, inaugurating the stretch of highway between Berlin and Stettin. Hitler and his men were the first to grasp the interest of using the camera to directly associate them with their successful endeavors. Yet someone else would do them one better. Leni Riefenstahl, the former mountain climbing actress turned filmmaker. In 1934, handpicked by Hitler to make a film on the Nuremberg Rally, she pushed the lesson even further. Where the Führer had once been surrounded by cameras held at bay, she got permission to film right inside Hitler's car. The effect of proximity was gripping. Those applauding him today on the side of the road would be able to travel right beside him in darkened theaters tomorrow. Her film, Triumph of the Will, in total harmony with the Nazi aesthetic she fully shared, was a smashing success. She herself probably didn't even realize that where men are remarkably ordered in line, only a few omnipotent ones emerge from the mass of robots. Hitler would commission his zealous admirer to film his next high mass, this time on a world scale, the Olympic Games set to take place in Germany in 2 years' time. Near Berlin, where architect Werner Mark had chosen a 15,000 square meter site, construction work was in full swing. Cathedral-like light was already streaming into the main nave of the covered gymnasium. For his stadium, Hitler insisted on limestone from Franconia, which the Reich considered its primordial stone. Same for the 36 pillars that surrounded the edifice. While the Eckhart Amphitheater, bearing the name of a notorious anti-Semite, copied the one at Delphi, which the Greeks considered the center of the world. Meanwhile, the Führer watched over the construction from his eyrie. On this day, his guest was Arno Breker, his favorite sculptor. When we consider the demeanor of these two defenders of triumphant Aryanism, then take a closer gander at Mrs. Breker, we realize there had to be some serious disconnect with reality. That wasn't the kind of detail to stop this admirer of Mayol and Cocteau, who for months had been raising an army of Apollos destined to encircle the Berlin Stadium on the big day. The wrestlers and runners fashioned by Joseph Torak, the Reich's other official sculptor, were even more monumental. His Munich atelier was just large enough to contain his plaster follies, as impressive looking as they were hollow. How could simple flesh and blood athletes hope to compete with these giants, unless it was by raising an arm in the air?
Deutschland hat zwei große Aufgaben zu erfüllen. 1936 aufzutreten als gütiger Gastgeber für alle Nationen, die zu den Olympischen Spielen kommen, und ebenso als Teilnehmer. Sie sehen also, dass sportlich, technisch, organisatorisch vor uns eine herrliche, große nationale Aufgabe ersteht.
The budget for the Games had rocketed from 1.5 million to 28 million Reichsmarks. Nothing was too beautiful, especially for this 120,000 capacity arena, crucible of a new ideal. Nothing was impossible either for the Krupp steelworks. For example, a 10-ton Olympic bell made of steel instead of cast iron. The Winter Games were rung in under the auspices of an eagle that already clasped the Olympic rings in its talons. And they're off. In February 1936, all eyes turned to the Games in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, the famous station in the Bavarian Alps, where Germany counted on a dazzling demonstration. Even the snow did its part, making its grand entrance the day Hitler arrived. The man truly did have incredible powers. Already with the opening ceremony, the French showed their first ambiguities. Although there's nothing equivocal about the Führer's salute, the French team is harder to judge. They merely performed the Olympic salute, which, after all, is almost identical. Same for the British. Yet, it was possible not to amalgamate, like the Americans, standing tall and staring Hitler straight in the eye, giving him reason to sulk. Luckily, there's the Norwegians too, true Aryans, with ice skating queen Sonja Henie, a worldwide star even the Nazis recognized. "775 athletes came to these fourth Winter Olympics, twice as many as 4 years earlier in the US. Already a feather in Hitler's cap.
Die vierten Olympischen Winterspiele 1936 in Garmisch-Partenkirchen für eröffnet.
Before the ecstatic Germans, the Olympic Committee was a bit overwhelmed, agreeing to admit a rather unseemly new event in which the Germans hoped to shine: military patrol. On D-Day, the Finns took off in the lead, followed by Mussolini's Italians and the Führer's Germans. The event, precursor of today's biathlon, was meant to simulate a war mission in no man's land. 4 soldiers had to cover 25 kilometers, equipped with muskets and a 10-kilo backpack. At the first transit time, the well-aligned Italians head the field, soon to be overtaken by the Finns, who take a 30-second lead, while the disunited Germans are already lagging. The Finns lead after the shooting event, where the Italians don't score the points needed to make up their time. But in the last stretch, the Italians cut loose and finish in first place. Mussolini and his men have reason to celebrate. Behind them, the Finns arrive in second place, while the Germans finish only fifth. When it comes to sports, it's hard to schedule a victory in advance. Another disappointment on the skating rink, where success slipped through the Germans' fingers. When the Norwegian missile Ivar Ballengrud launched off the starting block, there was no contending with a giant from a small country of less than 2 million that nevertheless outshone the great Germany. In the end, 3 gold medals and 1 silver for Ballengrud, the hero of the Games. Same story in individual figure skating, where the public only had eyes for the other Norwegian star, the amazing Sonja Hennie. She too made Germany's head spin. And captured a 6th gold medal for Norway. As the end of the Games approached, Germany pinned its hopes on seeing its athletes win some medals in the prestigious ski jumping competition. The day of the event. 100,000 hopeful spectators were in attendance. But once again, the Norwegians, led by Birger Ruud, won the event with flying colors, crowning their country with glory once more. To the annoyance of the Führer. It was just too much for the official cameraman, who quickly grew bored with gold medalist Birger Ruud. Better to focus on the spectacle of birdmen gliding across the sky of a Reich that valued supermen above all else. One thing was sure. Before the Summer Games 5 months away, Germany would have to strive hard and march as one. Pull together and train even harder. Firstly, in the most noble domain, athletics, where the events hark back to Hellenic times, a period Hitler's Reich fancied itself heir to. From Apollonian athlete to Aryan warrior, it's just a tiny leap. Already the propaganda train, the Olympiazug, was speeding over 6,000 miles around the entire country to spread the Olympic good news. Looks impressive from a bird's eye view, all the more reason to summon a new mastodon. The regime commissioned a new Zeppelin, which once again broke every record. 800 feet long, 135 feet high, 248 tons powered by 1,300 horsepower. With its Olympic rings and swastikas, the L-129 Hindenburg fulfilled its role as poster child. In early March, the Titan made a test flight over Lake Constance. Soon alongside its little brother, the L-127, it would undertake its maiden flight, lasting 4 days and passing over the Reich's most prestigious locations. The Tannenberg site symbolized the Prussian victory over Russia. the cities of Germany, the eternal Nuremberg, a medieval Cologne. The 80 journalists on board were pampered and spoiled, in hopes the praises would flow freely from their pens. In the spring, the airship continued to set records for crossing the South Atlantic and North Atlantic. Exploits worthy of the approaching Olympic Games, as Germany gazed scornfully down at New York skyscrapers that made the reputation of its future opponents. That month, June 36, another of Hitler's champions was already in the US, in the Catskills Jewish Country Club, to boot, where boxer Max Schmeling was preparing his match against African-American Joe Louis. Though not a vassal of the Nazi regime, the German heavyweight was nevertheless on a mission against Joe Louis. Not hard to understand in light of the news over in the Reich. More than a presentation, these were preliminaries, German style.
Tausende von Zuschauern fanden sich jeden Tag ein. Meist waren es Rassegenossen des berühmten Negerboxers, ihn trainieren zu sehen. Ein Blick noch auf seine ausgeprägte Rückenmuskulatur, die den Schlüssel zu seiner ungewöhnlichsten Schlagkraft bildet. Und ruhig, phlegmatisch, als ginge ihn das alles nichts an, geht zur Arbeit in den Ring.
Why not slow and lazy while we're at it? True, the self-assured brown bomber hardly prepared for the match. For months, like a seasoned pro, Schmeling had been studying films of his young opponent's matches. I noticed, he said, he was vulnerable to a direct right near the top of the head. Clearly, the day of the match, Schmeling knew what to do. In the fourth round, for the first time in his career, the brown bomber crashed to the mat. By the 12th round, bashed and battered, the American was nothing but a zombie, whom the German clobbered for good. In Germany, 20 million viewers watched the Negroes defeat live. Back home, Max's pretty wife Annie awaited, all alone apparently, so as to tug harder at the nation's heartstrings. In reality, thousands of people stood nearby to welcome the new national hero. A huge boxer returning in a huge dirigible. Hard to beat that. Schmeling might still have wanted to believe in his independence, but how could anyone resist getting swept up in Germany's momentum?
Und für das Ansehen des deutschen Volkes in Amerika gekämpft haben.
A homage that sounded more like a free ride on the Royal Road in spring of '36, when everything seemed to smile upon the Führer's champions. On June 14, beneath stormy skies, crowds flocked to the new Burgring racetrack to watch the first Grand Prix of the season on German soil. From the start, German Rainmaster Caracciola in his Mercedes and Italian Nuvolari, the Flying Mantuan, in his Alfa Romeo were in the lead. But soon Caracciola had to drop out due to mechanical problems. All hopes were pinned on a certain Bernd Rosemeyer. This guy was incredible, cutting it close, shifting speeds at just the right moment. An amazing daredevil. He quickly caught up to, then overtook, Nuvolari. The thick fog didn't change a thing. When everyone else slowed by 20 miles per hour, Rosemeyer kept his pedal to the metal. By the finish line, he had earned the nickname Fogmaster, a token of how popular he had become. What's more, he seemed terribly likable. Another reason to shepherd him, like every other racing champ, into the elite SS fold, where he was made first lieutenant and a new icon of the regime. 3 weeks later, on the same track, while Mr. and Mrs. Goebbels watched in delight, the handsome blue-eyed Aryan once more captured the official German Grand Prix. Another surprise. At his side was aviator Ellie Beinhorn, who had just become his wife. Could there be a more glamorous romance than the beautiful aviator and the archangel speed demon? No one could ever claim the Third Reich wasn't fond of fairy tales. For their honeymoon in Africa, the Nazis offered the newlyweds a pretty little Typhoon Messerschmitt. Intent on enjoying life to the hilt, the two lovebirds didn't even realize they were being turned into puppets of the regime. Bernd used the opportunity to learn to fly under the loving instruction of his wife. Oh, what fun it is to ride across the African sky.